Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're a first time viewer. I'll be discussing how to effectively make reloads in the safest way possible to get the maximum result with the least amount of trouble. That's what we all want when we reload. We want something that works. It just doesn't poke hole in paper. It's gotta drop a bad guy in self-defense, lawful self-defense. It's gotta do everything it's supposed to do. So to do that, we have to know what we're working with and be as safe as possible. So what I have here is a bunch of loaded up mixed match range brass. You may not have the luxury of buying brass. If it's new brass, you could go ahead and load it up just fine. The shell hasn't stretched, so it didn't balloon out. Ballooning is what they do. So what I'm talking about is you get the snake swallowed the rat look. See that little knuckle there? This shell actually had a belly on it before it was resized. Because if you spin this guy around, actually this belly's almost pretty consistent on there. Let me find one where it's not consistent. It looks a little bit bananaed, if you will. Let's see if I can find one. Typically, Glocks do that when you get a shell that's been expended. Is that the same one? No, this is not nickeled. Okay, so mind you, watch that band around that bullet shank. I'm going to give it a little turn. See if I can get a good camera view here. It's like my camera's got cataracts. But if you watch the shine go along the length of the case, pretty hard to show you. Well, actually right here, you see how it's pretty consistent. It's like one rectangular shine, but when I bring her up here, you can see a break in it. That's because of the belly of the shell. That's where the feed ramp was in the chamber when this thing ballooned out. And when you resize these things, that metal's got to go somewhere, and that's where it went. It went to the inside. It had no other place to go. So typically you look for once fired brass because it's been ballooned, if you will, and it's better to work with, versus new brass. New brass is very, very tough, and quite often the bullets don't seat concentrically. So in order to compensate for the ballooning in the shell, we have to uniform them, and also because of the ballooning of the shell, the case necks on these, that's the part that holds the bullet, tend to vary according to manufacturer and whether or not that it was a plus P or plus P plus whatever type of high pressure bullet, or if it's been reloaded quite a few times. The elasticity of the case mouth will vary. And in the worst case, when you resize these guys, the bullet will set real deep. And if that happens to you, you could disassemble your bullet and chuck that shell, start all over again with a better shell. Or you could just throw it in your range pile. So you don't have to worry about that, because you can't trust that one in self-defense or when it matters. You're not going to put a crimp on it. You're just going to throw it in your range pile for practice. Because of that, we have to seat our bullets inward more deeply to compensate for the lack of case neck tension. So, like I was telling you guys that if the case neck is bad, the bullet will inset, and when that happens, it increases the pressurization of the cartridge, and it could be very unsafe. You could blow a shell and hurt yourself, maybe damage your gun. It's not a good thing. Reloading can be dangerous. Buying reloaded ammunition can be extremely dangerous. If you're not paying attention to what you have, just because you trust a reloader doesn't mean that every bullet's going to be safe for you. There's a lot that can go wrong with press reloading on a commercial scale. Like, for example, the primer could be reversed. The more inset you get, the more consistent you get with the case neck tensions on mystery brass that you get out of a berm or at a range like this stuff here. It's like, I don't know where this came from. I don't know how many times it's been fired. You know, it's really hard to tell because, you know, I mean, somebody might cycle the same bullet 2 or 3 times before they actually fire it. And it's going to leave marks on the brass, so you have no idea. You know, so you want to create a standard to work with. So all of these shells would need to be cut down to a common length, and you want your bullets to seat constantly in the same depth. And because of the ballooning, the primer cups vary too, if it was a high pressure load or not. So there are tools to recut the primer cup to remove any kind of military crimp that might be on there. You can't put a new primer in if you got a military crimp. It's going to destroy it. So I have a wonderful tool like that. I could show you guys what I'm talking about. What can happen is if you load this in a mag tube type gun where they're stacked like this, well, actually that could go off. You know, if that hits the primer, you know, like one of them Marlin rifles where you slide it through the mag tube, bang, it'd go off. But on some guns, you can get slam fires if your primer cup sticks up too high. You know, especially on the floating firing pins. If you have a 1911, quite often, because of the way it feeds, quite often can be choppy. And when that happens, the firing pin kisses the back of the primer, and you'll see a little impression. I don't like that. So, you know, to make it as safe as possible, you want your primers to be flush. As flush as can be. There we go. Okay, so I have a shell that's been expended. So I have a Lee hand press. It takes a considerable amount of strength to use these. There aren't too many people that like them because of that. Maybe they're just not as strong as they think they are. Oh, I said it. No, I am kidding. But anyway, so we're going to put this in. All right, so it's all sized. What we have here is the ballooned outward brass is now pushed in an attempt to make it uniform. And you can tell the case mouth is round. You know, where it had a dent in it before. There's some dent on here and it's kind of dirty. I'll give you that. And the primer's gone. You want to use your case trimmer. And these guys right here, you have to dial it in to where you want it. the length that you want. I don't use pilots at all when cutting the shell, because if you do that, it has a tendency to mess up the resized brass. So we've got that same expanded shell, and you see right there that little round bearing there. It finds the center of the cup, the primer cup, to be able to trim the case to spec for the specification I want to use. I can't do it because I don't know what I'm working with in terms of what the primer pocket looks like, because it's not going to find a center. You know, it's going to be probably all twisted and contorted out of shape. So what we have to do is we have to use a means, okay, to uniform it. So that's what the primer cup looks like. And right here, I'll put it on there. See what we got. It's uniform. We have a constant shine. That's what we want. And we got a sharp edge, you know, around the mouth. So we want to get rid of that and put it on this one. What this does is it bevels it, make it easier to put a primer in. See all that? Ta-da! Now we're uniform. We have a concentric, you know, diameter, and we have a known pocket depth. So from here, we'll make sure it's all that stuff's out of there. Now what we have is a uniform primer pocket. The diameter is known, the depth is known. So now we could proceed to trimming the brass. So we got a little bit ways to go here. And you just keep spinning her until things get really easy back at the crank. See? Now you know it's done. Take her out. You got a sharp edge on the inside and on the outside. That's no good. Hold on here. Get this out of the way. All right. You wanna knock that burr off, both sides. Whoops, grabbed it. It's always a problem with these little tools. Make sure that there's no burrs. All right, there it is. It's at a known length. The primer pocket's consistent. So now, if you do that to every shell, you'll have something that is known and consistent. So I'm pretty confident that the length is correct and the mouth is uniform. It's deburred. Now we can load this thing. So now we put the other die in that flares it. Put the shell in there, like that. Put her in there. There it is. Now you are ready for business. Totally ready for business. You want to soak them in something to get the grease off it Like a lot of times you get transfer with your reloading dies and your cutting bits, and you might want to use like white vinegar or something to clean the shell. But I'm not going to go through the whole reloading process, but I could hope that you could appreciate how you get to this point. And this is where you begin. This is where you begin your reloading adventure. The next thing you want to consider is the type of bullet that you're going to put in here, because the shell is probably tired, because who knows how many rounds have been through this. It came out of a berm. You want something that you know is going to penetrate with the least amount of effort. And the only thing that we really know that definitely penetrates with the least amount of effort is Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket is incredibly hard and inexpensive compared to hollow points. You don't have to worry too much about powder variances when you do your charges. You know, Full Metal Jacket is well known to penetrate, and if it doesn't penetrate, it doesn't do its job. So there you have it. And one other thing in regards to your powder is when you put a crimp on these things, it slows the release of the bullet, which causes an increase in temperature, which you end up getting a cleaner, more uniform powder combustion inside the shell when it goes off. So you definitely want to put, at least a light crimp on your bullet, but you don't want to put such that the back of the bullet here becomes unseated in the shell, like you see with a lot of like light green bullets. Something like this guy here. This is not a 45. It's probably like a 380 or something. Looks like it's probably like 92 grain. But there's not a whole lot of shank to it right here. So if you were to crimp the shell on this, if the shell was like, you crimp it like this is how you see my hand, how it, like if you were to crimp it, okay, got my gloves on here. Let's say it's up here, and then you crimp it. The shell gets shorter when you crimp it, and it bites on the bullet like that. So, if the shank is little like that, what will end up happening is you can get set back real easy into the shell and get an overpressure, which could be dangerous. So you have to watch how much you crimp your bullets. You just want the sides of the shell to kind of like be a little bit more inward than straight, and then you're good to go. But if you have a lead round, you're going to end up having to put a monster crimp on it, because lead takes off faster and it's lubricated. So some people think they get an amazing deal on lead projectiles, but it's an incredibly bad idea in a handgun. Like revolvers, that's fine. Revolvers have some nice tall rifling. But in a pistol, it's a bad idea because you lose accuracy really quick with lead. It just makes a mess. And you want to keep it clean, keep it simple. So your Full Metal Jacket is your go-to load bullet, because you're going to get the least amount of trouble, and it's going to do what you want it to do. There you have it, guys. It's up to you. Decide how to load your stuff. For the purposes of this video, I wanted to impress on how to get the most out of what you can get. And also, you want to pay attention to how long these bullets are. You don't want them too long, and you don't want them too short. If they're too short, a lot of times they get jostled in the magazines, and the back ends come up higher than the nose, and you end up with a mag jam. So the bullets jam in the magazine. So case overall length is critical. That's how long it is from here to there. If you have it too long, what can happen is if you don't fire this thing after you chamber it and then you clear it, the ejector could set this sucker off. It could blow up. Extended, ejectors are an incredibly bad idea. Those things popped up sometime in the latter part of the 90s. They thought that was a great performance enhancement. It's not. So be careful. Be very careful when you reload. Pay attention to what you're doing, but you want constant results. So everything has to be constant. Your shell has to be constant. Your bullet seating depth has to be constant. Your case neck tension has to be constant. And your primers shouldn't be sticking up. So when you ream them like this, they're not going to stick up, because even the primer cup gets shorter the more you shoot these things, especially a hot load. You'll see that hole in the center. That's called a flash hole. That's where all the primer stuff kind of into the powder and sets the powder off. But you never really have to deburr that, because that hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger more times that this shell is shot. And I know a lot of reloading manuals, they tell you to do all kinds of stupid stuff that doesn't make sense if you know how this stuff works. And that's one of them. You don't ever have to mess with your flash hole at all. And your cases on pistols, your shells tend to get shorter when you shoot them, and they don't get longer. Rifle brass tends to get longer when you shoot it because of the shoulder. The shoulder has a tendency to grab, in the chamber. I don't have one with me right now, but that causes the case to stretch, and what ends up happening is it gets longer and thinner, and you have to trim them down, and then you have to anneal them. But for like handgun brass, you want to keep it simple, and that's the most that you can get right there. If you use mismatched brass. And don't worry about it if you don't get your shells back when you go shooting, because you might go there with 100 and you might find like 50, 30, or 25 of the shells. So you'll probably end up using mismatched brass anyway. All right, guys, if you like my video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you do not miss out. I'll catch you later.